Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the U.S. Jobs and Veterans during the World's EV Moment panel discussion, which has been organized by the Electrification Coalition and SAFE. I am Aaron Viles, the campaigns manager for the Electrification Coalition. If you are not familiar with the EC, we're a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization that promotes policies and actions to facilitate the deployment of plug-in electric vehicles on a mass scale in order to reduce the economic, public health, and national security risks caused by America's dependence on oil. We're presenting this evening conversation with our sister organization, SAFE. SAFE enhances the nation's energy security and supports our economic resurgence and resiliency by advancing transformative transportation and mobility technologies and ensuring that the United States secures key aspects of the technology supply chain to achieve and maintain our strategic advantage. So we are gathering folks tonight. We've got, I think, a wonderful agenda. We are starting off with two distinguished speakers. We're starting with Admiral Dennis Blair and then Representative John Soka from North Carolina. And then we'll have two panels. So, the speakers will last about half an hour, and then we'll do a panel focused on EV deployments, some exciting examples of how they are how they're being used in out in the world, and then we'll have a second panel that's on veterans hiring in the exploding EV space. So we've assembled what I think is relatively remarkable. We have every voice you will hear besides mine is a veteran, somebody who has served our nation. Why are we focusing on a veteran's perspective? I think for a number of reasons. One is that our current oil dependency, we have 90% of our U.S. transportation is powered by oil, leads to a fuel monopoly. It's the largest source of our greenhouse gas emissions, and it leads us to kind of foreign engagements to secure that oil. And so EVs, to me at least, are a natural answer to some of those concerns. We'll hear from Admiral Dennis Blair about that specifically. But why is this an EV moment? So from Glasgow to DC to Detroit, the commitments to an EV future are incredibly clear. Currently, right now, there's an international convening happening in Scotland to discuss our globe's commitment to greenhouse gases, and then we are also, seeing at the same time in Washington D.C. decisions and policies are being passed to put resources into deployment of EVs. And then our friends in Detroit are making very significant commitments. GM is committed to join the ranks of Tesla and have an entirely EV line of light-duty vehicles by 2035. Ford is targeting 40% of its sales from EVs by 2030. Rivian's trucks and SUVs are rolling off its Illinois assembly line right now. And Amazon is committed to deploying 100,000 of Rivian's EV delivery vans. It's an impressive world that we're in right now. The EV future is incredibly clear, and the benefits to consumers and ratepayers is significant as well. More and more models are coming onto the market, with at least 50 available now, up from just a handful in the beginning of 2019. The growth is incredible. The styles are varied, from the Cadillac Lyriq to the Ford F-150 Lightning, truly a game changer. And the EV game has changed. Buck Rogers styling is no longer required to embrace an EV. And I think an EV is available to meet every need, which is really phenomenal. The benefits I mentioned are clear. The national security benefits we'll be discussing with Admiral Blair in a moment. But to consumers, you will save incredible amounts of money by embracing EVs. 60% less to power vehicles than an average gas-powered vehicle, 50% less on maintenance and repair costs compared to a gas-powered vehicle. And currently, over 90% of your charging is possible at home. This one I don't think we spend enough time talking about in the EV world. Who wants to go to a gas station? You will cut out gas station stops completely because you'll charge at home. The expected user would only need to charge 6 times on a public fast charger. per year if your EV has a range of 250 miles or more, which is basically all the EVs entering the space right now have more and more impressive ranges. So then one final point, local economies benefit from spending that money closer to home as opposed to sending the money to Texas or the Middle East. And a less known benefit for EV adoption is the downward pressure on your local utility rates. So off-peak charging and increased load actually means EV adoption can make your overall electricity rate go down whether or not you own an EV. So really an impressive number of reasons to embrace EVs. And what I really want folks to take away from this night tonight is just the many varied interests in the conversation about EVs. So we're having this event during Veterans Week, just in advance of Veterans Day. And the service that the folks you'll hear from tonight have provided our nation is significant. And at EC and SAFE, we are incredibly appreciative of the commitments that people have made, the sacrifices that people have made. And so, as I mentioned, everyone you'll hear from tonight, besides myself, is a veteran and an enthusiastic supporter of EVs. I'm the last thing, but I'm not the first thing. So, but I want to just bring on our most impressive, one of our most impressive speakers, Admiral Dennis Blair. He served as the Director of National Intelligence from January 2009 to May 2010. He led 16 national intelligence agencies, administering a budget of $50 billion and providing integrated intelligence support to the president, Congress, and operations in the field. Prior to rejoining the government, he held the John Shklovsky Chair in National Security Studies with the National Bureau of Asian Research. He served as the Deputy Director for the Project of National Security Reform, as a member of the Energy Security Leadership Council of SAFE. And from 2003 to 2006, Admiral Blair was the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for Defense Analysis, IDA, which is a federally funded research and development center that supports the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and the intelligence community. Prior to retiring from the Navy in 2002, Admiral Blair served as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Command. As the chair of SAFE, Admiral Blair is a huge voice for energy security, and we're very fortunate to have him with us tonight. Good evening, Admiral Blair.
Yeah, hello, Aaron. Glad to be with you and all my fellow veterans who are on this call.
Absolutely. So Admiral Blair, I know that you have very strong feelings about the role of the military and the intersection between national security and our dependency on oil. Share with the folks here kind of what led you to that kind of realization, and what motivates you to stay involved in this space that is clearly you're retired. You can spend your time however you like, but you spend a lot of time helping us tell these stories. What motivates you to do so?
Well, I think veterans have sort of a special responsibility that leads us to supporting the electrification of our transportation sector. Now, most people think that electric vehicles are primarily a good thing for environmental reasons. And, veterans share that feeling. In fact, I would say that veterans probably have a greater sense of common mission than do people who haven't served, and making the planet better for our children and our grandchildren is certainly a high common mission. And so, I think veterans believe in that by and large. But there's another more specific reason that apply to those of us who have served. The United States is now withdrawn after almost 20 years of heavy deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. There were soldiers sent many times on multiple tours to those countries. Navy ships rotated into the Persian Gulf and out of the Persian Gulf for many years. The Air Force, the Marines also deployed. And the reason that we were there, the reason that we were in that place was the oil role in our transportation sector. As you cited, it's over 90%. And although electric vehicles are coming along, it's going to be pretty high for many years. And it's not that the United States gets the oil that we put in our tanks from the Middle East itself, but it is a fact that it is the Middle East that really controls the world's oil price. And when there's a shortage somewhere in the world, whether it be to some geopolitical event or some natural disaster, the only place that can increase supplies quickly in order to keep the price reasonable is the Middle East. And so the United States, the most powerful country in the world, has played the role of ensuring that the oil can flow from the Middle East. However, it flows from some countries that if it weren't for that oil, we wouldn't have much in common with. The regimes in places like Saudi Arabia, the regime that was in Iraq, the regime that's in Iran now, other Gulf states don't believe in the democratic and personal liberty and personal rights ideas that we have in our country. But nonetheless, we have to make sure that that part of the world is stable, and we often do it by deploying military forces. And over the last 20 years, we've deployed them in huge numbers, and 7,000 of our servicemen have paid with their lives in Afghanistan, in Iraq during that time for our involvement there. And it really bothers me that the United States is so tied into the Persian Gulf, an area that we otherwise would treat quite differently because of oil dependency, because we can do something about it in this country. And what we can do about it is get off of that 90+% oil dependence and shift to an electrified transportation sector, including cars, which are run by an energy source which is entirely domestic, it's stable, it's relatively inexpensive. So we can do this here at home ourselves and make it unnecessary to send soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines halfway around the world to keep order in places that we would otherwise have very little to do with. So I'm strongly in favor of taking the measures here to electrify our transportation sector, including light vehicles, heavy vehicles, all of the other forms of it, in order to save our armed forces for the things where we really need them, the things that we can't do, we can't fix with measures at home, but we have to go overseas to support the country's interests. So that's why I drive a Bolt. And we can talk about what it's like driving a Bolt, but basically I'm motivated by trying to save the lives of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and keep them from being sent to work on things that we could fix here at home.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And I think I'd love to get into your Bolt a little bit, but I did want to just flag that as we discuss, and that's not really an intentional pun, but I'm sorry about that. I do think it's important to consider, obviously the Middle East has specific ramifications, but as we move away from oil as that 90% plus of our transportation fuel, and as we move to batteries and we move to EVs, it's going to be a slow process, right? So I think in the next few, we're at not even 3% of sales now. Auto sales are EVs. In a couple of years we'll get to 4 or 5%, but it'll come pretty quickly, and soon we'll be at I think the expectation from Bloomberg Finance is that we'll see 60% of new passenger vehicle sales in the U.S. will be EVs by 2040. That's not that far away, and I wanted to get your thoughts on as we make that shift. Clearly, we don't want to just trade Middle Eastern oil for Chinese batteries. What's your view on on the battery supply chain, and what should we be doing now to ensure that that international swap doesn't just happen?
Right. As you said, China, which tried for many years has tried for many years to compete in the internal combustion engine automobile category simply hasn't been able to grow an international company that can compete with the likes of Ford, GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, and so on. And recognizing that, they have decided to try to take a leap to electric vehicles. And they've done it partly for their own strategic reasons. They import 70% of their petroleum by sea through waters that are controlled by the United States. We have the most powerful Navy. That's where the oil comes into China from. And so from a strategic point of view, they want to shift to electric vehicles, but they also think that they can dominate the electrical vehicle industry as they have been unable to do for the internal combustion engine. And they've put a huge investment in it. And it's not only been in the car assembly companies, and they're beginning to export some fairly decent models around the world, but they have gone up the supply chains into the production of batteries, of the mega battery factories. We hear about a few here in the United States. Elon Musk is establishing that Ford and GM and are establishing, but that number is small compared to the mega battery factories that China is putting into place. And they are also moving strongly to have a big say in the materials that go into the batteries, the metals, the lithium, the anodes, the cathodes, the rare earths. So I certainly don't want to trade our dependence on Saudi Arabia for a dependence on China. And so another strong reason for America to pick up electric vehicles quickly is to create that high demand signal, which will make it profitable for American companies to move quickly into EVs. And in addition to that, we need to take some smart measures on the supply side to build supply chains for batteries and for other components that don't go through China. And we should do this in cooperation with our allies, and we should talk with them, but we should make it not dependent on any major component of an electrical vehicle, as well as the EV itself. So it's a sort of, we have two things we're navigating around here. One is the transportation sector dependence on the Middle East and other countries. Russia is also a big producer, and we have to thread that one. But then on the other side, we don't want to fall into the easy solution of just buying our EVs from China the way we tend to buy our toys and consumer goods and things like that. So it's a sophisticated set of policies. And those of us who are veterans who believe that the United States should not be dependent on the decisions of others to protect our national interests should be interested in and should be making sure that our government does the right thing.
Well, Admiral Blair, I just want to acknowledge that, you have been a leader in this space for quite some time. As you're speaking to other veterans, kind of in the Zoom, are there any thoughts you'd share with them in terms of, why it's valuable to get into these policy conversations, or, your kind of the tips or thoughts or encouragements? I know you can look at the political landscape and be nothing but, a little disgusted by the conversation that's happening. But I think the kind of high-minded and the kind of, American values forward efforts that you make help cut through a lot of that, that tribalism and, that partisanship. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on, should others do this? How should others do this? And any tips you have?
Well, I think veterans can just be uniquely effective because we're not making arguments that have to do with the current politics of the day. We're not red. We're not blue. We're not politically aligned. What we want to do is best for the country, and we've paid with our service to as proof of that. So I think people listen to us with a respect and a care that you don't hear from some of the political things on this. So I think we have a responsibility, and we have an influence that can be a sharp, it can be a strong voice. And I think we ought to exercise that at every level, at the local level, talking to our legislators, holding our companies to account at the state level. And we're going to hear from a state leader who is a veteran here soon, and he can tell us about that. But I think veterans have a voice on important national security issues of the day, and this is one of them. And so I think everybody ought to do it, and we ought to walk the walk too. I personally find driving an EV has lots of advantages, and one that I know a lot of veterans will. It's kind of funny, but I know they'll enjoy it. Almost all of us lost most of our hearing in the service. We sort of left it when I stood next to too many guns going off and too many loud engines. Virtually every service, a lot of people stood too close to airplanes for a long time, and we all left a part of our hearing in the service. And electric vehicles are nice and quiet, and you can hear everybody in there in your sound system when you want to. So there are certain advantages for vets in these vehicles, but more than that, I think bringing our voice to bring a national security perspective on why we should get off of oil and not get into Chinese EV dependence would be very powerful.
Wonderful. I was sure it was the instant torque. I was sure that was where you're gonna.
That too.
And as we were discussing this event, Admiral Blair, I do recall that you made the suggestion that we should be printing up bumper stickers, veterans for EVs, or another veteran with an EV. And I also know that you know, it's not the easiest thing to buy an EV right now off the lot. I don't know if you have any stories you want to share on that front, but it does seem that it takes a committed consumer early on to be an early adopter of the EV technology. Anything you want to share about that process?
Well, I did find that I knew more about EVs than the salesman at my local Chevy dealer here in Raleigh. The dealers haven't, I don't think, bought in fully. So I think it's but there's plenty of information available out there through the web that you can do your own education on it. And I just urge everybody to be persistent. Once I'd identified the model I wanted, I went to my local dealer, and it turns out that dealer didn't have them. So I had to go to my number 2 choice and number 3 choice. So I think that not only veterans, but everybody who wants to buy an EV is going to have to be a little persistent here for a while and do some of their own research to get what they want. So again, one more encouragement: buy that EV, put the gun rack and the bumper sticker on it, and let's go get this country off of oil and save our younger soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and our kids from having to go out in the world to solve problems that we could take care of by better policies here at home.
And that's a fantastic ending point for that. I think you know, your perspective is so incredibly powerful, and thanks for sharing it with us tonight. We've got a pretty jam-packed agenda, so I think we will move on to our next folks, and right on time. So I appreciate that, Admiral Blair, and always appreciate your service and your views here. So thanks again. I hope you'll be able to stay around and hear a bit more of our conversations. We're going to turn to EV policy now at the state level with Representative John Zoka, a conversation with Steve Rains. So if Steve and Representative Zoka can go ahead and put on your video, that would be wonderful. And then Representative Zoka is a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. He's a member of the North Carolina General Assembly. He is an advocate for renewable energy, And John is working hard for consumers to be able to choose how their energy is provided, reducing energy costs and promoting a healthier, cleaner environment. In 2017, John was the primary sponsor and leading proponent of HB 589, the Competitive Energy Solutions for North Carolina bill, which was passed into law, which totally revamped the way solar energy is brought onto the grid, which has already saved ratepayers over $350 million using free market principles. In 2021, John was primary sponsor and leading proponent of HB 951, Energy Solutions for North Carolina, which sets state goals for carbon neutrality and enacts performance-based rate making coupled with multi-year rate plans and revenue decoupling. First elected in 2012, Representative Soka was re-elected to serve his 5th term in the House in 2020. He is going to be interviewed or just this discussion with Steve Rains, who is the Senior Manager of Energy Management and Trading for Clearway Energy Group, a leading wholesale trading and energy market risk efforts across their portfolio. Clearway is one of the largest renewable energy companies in the United States with over 5 gigawatts of renewable wind and solar generation. But prior to his private sector career, Steve served as a surface warfare officer, deploying 3 times in support of the global war on terror. He served on the board of directors of the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations, as a member of the Service Academy Nominations Committee for Senator Jeff Flake, and Young Leader Programs of the Atlantic Council and Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's got an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management and studied abroad in Beijing, has a BS in economics from the U.S. Naval Academy, and he's coming to us from Scottsdale, Arizona. So take it away, Steve.
All right, thanks, Aaron. So
go.
I said I'd be remiss. We had the admiral from the great class of '68 and myself from '02, and now I'm interviewing a lieutenant colonel. So I got to give him a Go Navy, beat Army.
You didn't have to go there so early.
So early.
I'd like to tell people I got my start in the energy business as the electrical officer on board the mighty warship Princeton here over my shoulder. And so Representative Soka, thank you for taking the time to be with us here tonight and kind of shifting a bit from the admiral, who gives such a perspective on global issues and global policy, where you yourself are working very much at the state level. And in many ways, that's a place that's very close to veterans, a place where a lot of veterans can get involved and they can get involved locally. So I'm going to kind of steer us that direction. But first, I kind of want to bring this idea of bipartisanship or non-partisanship, I should say, into this issue, and talk a little bit about how you at the state level are able to focus on some of these core things like economic development, business development, jobs, career growth that are so important to transitioning veterans, but also represent wins for legislators on both sides of the aisle.
Well, thank you for that kind of introduction, except for the part about beat Army. It's really go Army, beat Navy. But having said that, there is a bit of a misconception I'd like to clear up a little bit, that what we see on TV at Congress and even in the halls of legislature at Raleigh sometimes is that the Democrats and Republicans are constantly at each other's throats. And that's what the news does. They make things dramatic so they can sell advertising. On many of the energy issues, it's bipartisan, working with people across the aisle. Bobby Hanig and other state legislators on the call right now, he's a Republican. We work with Democrats all the time to come up with good policy, because he and I and others, many others, are more about the policy than about the politics of it. And I think that policy that works for everyone, whether it's clean energy or whatever it is good for our state. So having said that, one of the challenges that we have as legislators in coming up with good policy is really to be able to look into the future just a little bit. An example of that was House Bill 589 in 2017. One of the last paragraphs in that bill said that we're going to study industrial sized batteries to pair with industrial solar facilities to see if those would be ready. Because in 2017, all the projections said that wouldn't happen until 2030. Well, before the study was done, almost before the study was done, they're already being deployed. So how do you come up with legislation that looks into the future when the best experts can't really predict where things are going to happen. You know, Aaron said a little bit earlier in his intro that by 2040, it might be 60% penetration. I don't know if that's the right number or the wrong number, but based on my experience with just battery storage, I think we're going to see it quicker than that. And we're going to see it quicker than that because of consumer choice and free markets in the United States. You know, early adopters pay more, and you have to wait for the infrastructure to be built, particularly charging stations. So that's one of the things that we in the legislature have looked at. I had a bill, it was House Bill 329, I think it was in the last session, that really allowed for the retail resale of electricity. And this kind of gets into the nits and grits of how vertically integrated utilities like to control all forms of energy, and how people like us like to make energy available to everyone. So basically what that did was, if you want to put in a charging station, a regular charging station, fast charging station, now you can do it and you can resell the electricity. So you buy it at one price, sell another price. That's just basic American free market. Yeah, that's how we work in this country. So we're trying to have more charging stations available. The other things, you know, I mean, I can't force anybody to buy an EV, or I can't force anybody to buy anything. What we can do is allow the markets a little more open so that some of these new up and coming companies are able to actually sell their products. So we as a country, I believe, are highly overregulated. And what we do is we look at the regulations that we have to live with that hold businesses back from being successful. That's what we do on the legislative side. And Bobby Hanig just, he said the thing says getting good results from House Bill 329 already. Well, thank you, Bobby. You know, what veterans can do if they want to get involved in this new energy economy, which it really is. Well, first of all, let me tell you a story from a developer friend of mine who builds solar facilities. He recruits at Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg, largest military installation in the world, and I represent Fort Bragg here in Cumberland County, has about 8,000 officers, warrant officers, senior non-commissioned officers, and enlisted guys either retire or end their term of service every year. He comes down here to recruit retiring NCOs to go out and run his work crews for a couple of reasons. They're smart, they're drug-free, they show up for work on time, they're mission focused, and they get the job done. Every time he's replaced one of his crews with a supervisor who's from the military, even if they don't know hardly anything about solar panel installation, the efficiency of the crew improves by multiple factors, at least 100% better, more efficient, less mistakes. So for any rank coming out, you have the ability to go out and get that job. I'll take a breath here because it looks like you want to ask another question.
That's actually a wonderful segue, and it was going to kind of lead me into my next question as far as talking about skill set or transitioning skill sets. You know, how are there things that you can do as a legislator or as a policymaker where you are you know, encouraging programs like through community colleges or junior colleges or skill bridge programs such as that? And have you had success with that in North Carolina? Do you see the opportunities there? It sounds like you already have one great example of veterans transition, or, you know, the private sector partnering with you know, local policymakers to help aid veteran transition.
And that's a great question. The community college system in North Carolina is one of the best in the country, I believe. My local community college here, Fayetteville Technical Community College, took advantage of a federal grant a couple of years ago, Solar Ready Vets, where they had a class of 40 retiring folks, and some were just low ranks, were ETSing. They gave them an 8-week course on, depending on where they were. One was a lieutenant colonel, was the highest rank, and lowest, I think, was an E4. On how to install solar fields, just the basic electricity behind it, you know, the concepts behind it. They had 100% job placement when the class was done. They ran that a couple times till the money for that grant went out. It was a federal grant. I've been encouraging them to keep that program going, but it's always an issue of funding sometimes. But you look at things like that, and if there's any business owners on the call or people who know business owners on the call, military bases with folks getting out of the service are a great source of employees. And no matter where you are in the state, there's a community college that's close to you. So if you're looking for a pool of smart, drug-free, intelligent people who know how to do things, and you need them trained in specific skills, get with your local community college, your local legislator. And if you don't get any help there, call me. And I'll help you pair up with that, because that's what the community college system in North Carolina is designed to do, is to train people for the workforce. Sometimes it's a 6-week course, might be a 12-week course, it might be whatever you need as an employer. And we have right now a supply chain through at least 11 counties in North Carolina. So there are opportunities there.
Excellent, excellent. Well, then I guess with my last question before we run out of time, one, I would thank you for your continued service in the legislature after your Army career. But then again, thinking about veterans, how can they be involved, or how, from something as simple as reaching out to their local representative to looking at policies that are perhaps coming up for votes, I hesitate to use the word lobbying, but if they have a core interest, how do you think they should engage at either the city, state, local level?
Well, lobbying is done by people who are paid to do it. The proper term I think you're searching for is advocating.
Thank you. Yes, advocating. Thank you.
And you can, as a private citizen, I encourage people to advocate because it makes a difference. And I have people in my office when I'm in Raleigh come in there all the time, requesting something or telling me what's on their mind. Can you do this? Can you do that? I mean, for the North Carolina legislature, we have a website, ncleg.gov. You can go there, you can look at bills, you can listen to committee hearings, things like that. But the most important thing really is, like most other things in life, is to build a relationship with somebody who you're trying to convince of whatever you're trying to convince them. I mean, many of us on the call are married, and you didn't marry your spouse just because you saw the first person, like, let's get married, and you got married. You had to build a relationship. In talking to the legislators, it's the exact same thing. And I'm already married. I don't need to marry constituents, but the concept's the same. You have to find common ground there. And it works. There's a lobbyist on the call tonight who, when I first was in Raleigh, I was like, solar energy, bah humbug. All it does is exist because of tax credits. She took the time to educate me. I took the time to listen and educate myself. And now I'm one of the leading solar EV advocates in the legislature. So people's mind can be changed. They're usually not changed by stomping around outside buildings, carrying signs, yelling, screaming through bullhorns. That really doesn't change anybody's mind. It might make the person doing that feel better somehow about themselves, but it doesn't change policy. If you want to change policy, find out who your local legislator or congressman is, meet them wherever they live. I mean, if somebody wants to talk to me, I try and meet them down here in Fayetteville, go to the coffee shop at the end of the street where I work and sit down and have a conversation, a rational conversation. Most legislators look for that. They don't like the massive form letters that come when everybody says the same thing and it comes from a site. If you want to get involved in the political process, get involved, but do it the right way and talk to folks. And I saw there was a chat, and yes, it was Betsy McCorkle who was that lobbyist. So hopefully that answers that question for you.
It does. And thank you very much. And Aaron, I'll turn it back over to you. And thank you very much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Beat Navy.
Last one. We got the last one.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thank you, Reverend Zoka. That was just a fantastic conversation. Every time we do one of these things, I always think, man, we got to keep people more time, but we don't have all night. We do need to move on to our panels. We have a wonderful panel lined up. Our first panel will be focused on EV deployments. and some, I think, really interesting stories about how EVs are showing up right now. I wanted to make sure that if you're not familiar with EVs, if you're not excited to get the bolt like Admiral Blair, there are some ways you can see EVs providing benefits to your community, even as you hold on to your Charger or your Dodge Ram, and just see what's happening in our community. I think we're going to hear some fantastic stories from this All Veterans panel. And it's going to be led by Michael Milton Wu. Michael is the co-founder and principal at Converge Strategies, which is a consulting company focusing on the intersection of clean energy, resilience, and national security. Michael has strong working relationships within the U.S. military and deep expertise related to how defense energy business is transacted. His expertise in resilient energy has been built by a diverse career across government and industry. He's held leadership positions with New America, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, and the Truman National Security Project. Michael, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron. It's really great to be here. I just want to thank SAFE and the Electrification Coalition for having us, and also obviously for Admiral Blair and Representative Zoka. Really excited about the conversation we're about to have. It should be fast-paced, dynamic, and good news, all Army. So we have four, I think, amazing panelists, mostly because of their Army background. My personal background is as an Army officer, so excited for the conversation. I really want to try to accomplish two things in this conversation. Number one is give you an idea of the depth and breadth of progress in the EV markets today. So many people think about electric vehicles and have a focus on sort of single family passenger vehicles, sedans, and light trucks, but there's a whole host of different things that are happening in the EV space that are incredibly exciting, including with the Department of Defense. My background and our current work is widely built around DoD energy innovation, and the Department of Defense is doing a lot around electric vehicles, including electrifying the 160,000 non-tactical vehicles in its fleet, which are everything from sedans and light trucks to massive ground support equipment for aircraft and many other diverse sets of electric vehicles, and also huge investments in electrifying its tactical fleet. So those vehicles, aircraft, and ships are heavily being invested in electrification. But that's true about the rest of our economy too. So I'm excited to talk both about all the progress we're making, and then also to talk about where we're going in the future. And I'm very pleased to have a great set of panelists to talk about that. I'm going to start with Marcy Bauer. Marcy is a Senior Vice President at EVGO. She's the Senior Vice President of Program Delivery. Marcy has a diverse and fascinating career in clean energy after leaving the U.S. Army. Marcy, I really just wanted a sense of really about your experience in clean energy, how your experience in the military led you to really focus on clean energy, and then how does that connect to your work today at EVGO?
Thank you. So I joined the Army in the late 90s. I had high hopes of serving my country and seeing more of the world. Where I grew up, it seemed like a lot of people really didn't venture too far from home, and I wanted to get out and see what I could. So for my story on what brought me to be serving my country from my perch in the EV charging industry here in Raleigh is I did in fact get to see some places. It was during a deployment to Kuwait. I was able to get out on the Gulf waters and really directly encounter some of the pollution associated with the oil industry, which of course from history lessons I already knew was a major factor in our foreign policy. As Admiral Blair noted in the opening, global reliance on oil and the campaigns that result from that reliance really bothered me too. So from there, I tried to take on as many additional duties as I could that were associated with reducing environmental impacts, including vehicle and other hazmat compliance type stuff. And I also explored related career options from within the service, but not really finding any. I did separate to pursue environmental management and clean transportation full time. So for me, this work and this industry has always been as much about national and energy security as it is about anything else. really the overwhelming majority of our energy is produced domestically. And as such, it's much more within our control for building in more resilience and more independence, which is really, really important to me. No tech is perfectly perfect. You saw a comment in the side chat about coal. It's true, we have coal in our grid, and no tech is perfectly perfect at solving all of the world's problems. But with electrified transportation, it really solves for the most important things in the biggest and most efficient way with the longest term positive impact. And that all sort of just bubbles up to being like, this is where I need to be. So from a more personal and experiential standpoint, though, EVs are just damn fun to drive. Someone mentioned instant torque earlier. I think it was Aaron mentioned instant torque for that acceleration. You just don't get that with gas vehicles. It's got a quiet, really centered ride that's unbeatable. So if anyone on the in the attendance list or panelists haven't test driven one, I strongly encourage you to do so. But as Michael introduced me at the beginning, my role is more from the charging standpoint, and so I'm happy to solve some of the problems that the other panelists mentioned regarding not enough chargers out there. That's my day in, day out, is getting more chargers out there.
And tell us a little bit about EVGO as a company. I know it's the, I believe it's the largest charging company in the country, if not the world. So where are you working? How is that going? And yeah.
Yeah, so I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but my purview is all of the U.S. And we do have the largest number of charging locations in the U.S., fast charging locations, I should say. And so that's, just to sort of slip into technical parlance, that's 50 kilowatts or faster, but it's essentially anything that's going to get you a charge in 30 to 90 minutes rather than hours and hours and hours for the slower chargers. So we tend to deploy places where people want and need to go anyway that aligns with that session length. So it's a grocery stop, it's a coffee shop, it's a quick retail stop, at all of the best places that they want to be doing those things anyway. So we're partnered up with a lot of really terrific retail partners to get our chargers where they need to be, to have people not identifying that as a problem and a barrier for them to get into EVs.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcy. I'm excited to return to the conversation about electric vehicles and support equipment and chargers later on, but I want to turn now to Al Curtis, who's the director, the fleet director for Cobb County in Georgia. Al Al, you were elected to the Fleet Management Hall of Fame, which I was very excited to learn existed. But I want to hear a little bit about your experience on the cutting edge of fleet management, and why are fleets so important to what we're trying to accomplish from a vehicle electrification standpoint? What are some of the really cutting edge things that you're doing that you're excited about?
Well, background, 10 years in the military, got out of the military as a motor sergeant. So that's really a segue into the private sector of automotive technology and vehicles and so on. And I did a stint in the private sector for about 7 years, and then ended up in the public sector working public government for Cobb County. So with that, coming from when I got out of the military, I got out in California. So I kind of embraced a lot of the environmental and sustainability pieces that California had and brought them over to Georgia. I mean, you got to think about coming from California to Georgia. It was a really culture shock for most people, and trying to deploy alternative energy or alternative fuels to Georgia. But the good thing about that, and coming to Georgia, I had the support factors to actually move the needle pretty well in alternative energy, from biodiesel to propane to hybrid vehicles. And the reason why this is so important from a fleet perspective, there's 38,000 fleets spread across the country. We produce in fleets more greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions. So it's really important that we as fleets, from that standpoint, to embrace a way to minimize our CO2 footprint. I mean, with the view of carbon right now and this climate change and how that's affecting the country, I looked at it from a county perspective. You have to take baby steps, and doing what you can for the area that you're in. So with that, we started in 2014 in our electrification movement, bringing hybrid vehicles in, and also we were the first municipality in Georgia to embrace electrification. And the way we did that is We use data to drive that decision. We use duty cycle analysis. We took one department and said, okay, if you travel 90 miles, this is when the lease first came out, when electrification was not, it was a buzzword, but not many people embraced it. So we took that and said, okay, if your duty cycle for a day is 40 miles round trip or 50 miles round trip, then this electric vehicle would fit into your mix. So we put it out. We actually analyzed the driving pattern of a certain department and said, okay, yes, you drive 40 to 50 miles. So we actually put them into electric vehicle, but first we actually did ride and drives and put butts in seats to get them acclimated to the car. We had the dealerships come out and walk around, and for the technical aspects of the vehicle where we weren't totally technically savvy because this was a new vehicle to be introduced, the dealership, the Nissan dealership took it on themselves to come out and actually walk through and ride and drive and give out pamphlets. We actually did, well, I did quite a few videos of alternative fuel deployment to get our drivers really acclimated and get them really on board. But one of the biggest aspects of it is from a fleet perspective, you can get your users on board, but guess what? What about the technicians? They have to work on these vehicles. They have to feel comfortable with these vehicles. So what we actually did in that respect, we took our biggest technician that was a really good old boy, okay, say 6'3", 230 pounds technician, and we put him in the vehicle. And he was one of the loudest mouths in the shop. So you put him in the vehicle and he drove it. And he's used to, a V8 big block Chevy Ford 302 guy. He got in the vehicle, he embraced it. And that's all it took for the shop. He loved the vehicle, and the technicians gravitated to him because he was one of the loudest ones in the shop. So we got the buy-in from the bottom and also from the top. So with that deployment in 2014, again, we did 16 Nissan Leafs. We worked with Nissan and received, they donated us a level 3 DC fast charger, the first one in the county, the first DC fast charger in the county that they donated to us. And from that, we worked with the Georgia Environmental Funding Authority, working with DOE to deploy electric charging stations infrastructure strategically spread throughout the county to allow our citizens actually see that we're taking steps to lower our greenhouse gas emissions and also to usher in a charging station ecosystem, because that's really important to have that to get the adopters for the electric vehicles. So with that said, we've deployed over 50 electric vehicles within the department, spread strategically out through the departments. We have hybrid interceptors in our police department, which is the SUVs. We're working on getting the Ford Lightning as soon as it's actually released out. We actually have electric motorcycles within our fleet as well, which that was a really good choice that we use for our Rangers on our Silver Comet trails and our core properties. So we've been looking, early, we're one of the early adopters in electrification. And we also are working solar right now with the first municipalities to deploy solar to charge some of our electric vehicle from in our resilience department. And right now we're working with the solar resilience grant to add more solar and backup storage to our new maintenance facility. So we like I said, we recognized early on that electrification, one, it's going to save us in cost. It's going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and it's going to reduce our overall cost, total cost of ownership. A lot of people think up front, right, yeah, the vehicle costs a little bit more. But if you look at it over a period of time, as far as fuel usage, repair and maintenance, and overall total cost per mile, you're looking at a vehicle 30 to 40 cents cost per mile. Electric vehicle, you're looking at 12 cents. And with the companies that we work with right now, Georgia Power, they offer a program where if you purchase an electric vehicle, you get a discount on your off-peak charging. And also they're working on a program for vehicles for counties and governments and nonprofits where they'll go ahead and run the wiring, run all the infrastructure for it, and all you have to do is hang the charger. I mean, that's really a no-brainer.
Yeah, Al, I was just going to say, I think you hit on like so many important key points, and one of the most important is that this just makes sense financially for a government, in addition to environmental. You don't have to choose. I mean, it's important from a security perspective. It's important from a financial perspective. I think one of the keys to that you identified is just the maintenance costs are just drastically lower. And I think that's a really good transition point to bring in Michael Callender to the conversation. Michael's the manager for project development at Highland Electric Fleets. So an actual, somebody who's actually focused on transforming fleets from the private sector and obviously focused on working with a lot of governments. Highland Electric Fleets is really focused on EV buses. So Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about the investments that you're making, some of the investments that you're seeing in the market, and what that sort of vision for the future of electric bus fleets really looks like from your perspective.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we're seeing our model for school bus electrification is really taking off, and it's really the only way we see to do fleet electrification at scale. For context, our landmark project in Montgomery County, Maryland, is contracted for well over 300 electric buses in the next 5 years. And we do that by working with fleet managers and municipalities and talking about all those value streams that Al just brilliantly hit on. And we package them up through a private sector project company. We offset that super high CapEx in the early years with the OpEx, very low maintenance and repair costs over the life of the vehicle. And then we spread that over, 10 to 15 year cycle. We also plug that with other value streams like the many grants you've probably heard about. There's about $5 billion coming from the bipartisan infrastructure framework for school bus electrification. And then the other one that I'm most excited about right now is the resiliency aspect. We proved vehicle to grid technology on a commercial scale up in Massachusetts over the summer. So we were sending electrons back to the distribution level, and we were getting paid a kilowatt summer rate. A rather interesting way to do it, but it's something we can bank on and actually value and use to lower that cost to the districts that we serve. And what's really exciting is if you think about all the complexity that Al just laid out in electrification of fleets, most of that is non-existent for school bus. It's the most predictable vehicle out there. It goes out for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And by the way, all summer, they're just sitting there parked, maybe doing some minor maintenance, but they're available to do energy services. And so that's the value stream I'm most excited about, both selling energy back to the utilities, but also finding creative ways to make the grid more secure through resiliency, plugging into critical facilities, microgrids, backup power. And that's where we see a lot of potential in the near future.
Yeah, Michael, let me drill down on that. So your vision for the future and one of the opportunities that are presented by electric vehicles, especially large scale electric vehicles like you're just describing, is that they are exportable sources of power that can help to. So give me like a visceral real life example of what you're envisioning.
Sure. Yeah. So the other key factors other than predictability of a bus is they have enormous batteries. They're batteries on wheels. And they're also everywhere in the country. Every school district is mandated to provide student transportation. So they're very underutilized, but massive batteries. So what we did in Beverly, Massachusetts is the charging system, the infrastructure is bidirectional, right? So we bring in a meter, our model pays for all the electricity, it reimburses for the maintenance. So it makes the transition to electrification easy for the municipality. But what we're doing is working with all those other stakeholders. The utilities are primary partner. And when the grid is most constrained, when most people are turning on their air conditioners, their appliances, and it's really hard to find energy supply, we send our batteries into reverse mode and we backflow energy to the grid to relieve that through extended supply. We're looking at actually being able to use that battery as a mobile power source. So taking the vehicle to go plug into a town hall if there's a climate disaster or a blackout. Looking at powering microgrids around critical facilities as well. And even one I'm pretty excited about is using the bus to charge other vehicles. So if Al needed to keep his ambulances running in a blackout, we could use that depot as a municipal community charging station.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I mean, if so many of you may be familiar with, what happens in the aftermath of a disaster. But we're talking about taking big generators that often fail. In fact, in Hurricane Sandy, the failure rate for generators was more than 50% over extended periods. And having to tote them around where they needed to go. The model, Michael, that it sounds like you're describing is much more is A, reliant on something that's already mobile, B, something that's far more reliable and less dependent on moving parts than a traditional ICE generator. So, I mean, I think that's a model that's really exciting. I mean, and you're doing that today, but it's a good transition to talk about the future of these vehicles, some of the future capabilities. And I'm excited to bring in Paul Bowser, who probably has the coolest job of all of us, I'm sorry to say. Paul is the director of garage services at Roush Industries. He specializes in electrification, autonomy, integration, development of future vehicles. Roush, as you all may know, is sort of best known as hot rod souped up, very fast vehicles, but they work on a wide range of different vehicles and use cases. So Paul, I'll turn it to you and just ask, what are you working on that you can talk about that's really exciting? Where do you see some of the real key features of electric vehicles and things that you're working on that you think are going to be sort of tomorrow's story about these?
So first of all, Michael, thank you for the opportunity. And interestingly, almost everything that the panelist is talking about so far, we've had a part in some form of development for those technologies. And Roush has been involved in EV development since about the 1998, 1999 timeframe, and brought technology forward as those things improve. We take those technologies and integrate those into anything mobile, really. From the smallest AI EV delivery bot that's taking product from, say, a restaurant to a person's home to deliver it, to the EV Mustang or the F650 that Roush has just finished development on, that's fully electrified. We're good at taking someone else's platform and making improvements to it, and that's something that we've done for about 45 years now. Starting in 1976 and moving that forward. So it's exciting to see all the consumers out there now taking on our developments and using them to bring the EV market alive. Looking into the future of electrified vehicles, there's a lot of technology that's taking that electrification and challenging it as well. Taking AI systems and installing those in vehicles for that next step toward technology where not only are we going to take the ICE engine out, we're going to take the driver out as well, right? And make that a delivery of passengers, not just a sack of lunch. Now, as we take all those technologies and start plugging those together, we create new problems of, the kilowatts per hour that I can get from the battery, and that drives further development. So it's almost a vicious circle within our development realm of add technology, need more power, develop better power production, and so on to just continue through the loop.
Awesome. That's exciting, Paul. I mean, I think, some of the things that we've all talked about and that you're particularly focused on are those medium and heavy duty vehicles. It seems like we've really reached, a very clear and mature industry in passenger vehicles. But where are we going to see some of those gaps being filled for medium and heavy duty vehicles in the near future?
Good question. So a lot of the things that we know today, per your comment, were fully developed in the movement of passengers. But how do we continue into the movement of product? And some of the things that are missing in the market today are those connector vehicles. We've got some large truck companies in the heavy market that are working on terminal to terminal movements, right? But now how do you get that product from the terminal to the distribution center. And that a lot of times relies on the medium duty truck line. And that's why Roush pursued the electrification of an F-650. And we're working with a lot of different customers out there that we're taking their ideas, helping them to design, develop, prototype, integrate, and get those vehicles on the road so that we can get testing time, validation, as someone else pointed out earlier, butts in seats. Because if you take a guy out of a 15-liter delivery truck and tell him you're going to put him in an electric vehicle, he has no idea what he's getting into, and he wants nothing to do with it until you put him in the seat and he doesn't have to shift through 12 gears, and that torque is instant, right? He just hits the pedal and off it goes. So continuing development in those niche markets now where the vehicles are missing, right? Those final mile deliveries, anything from a small rickshaw type vehicle, a three-wheeler, to off-road golf carts, to electrified off-road vehicles for the military, to the medium duty deliveries. And again, it goes back to that consistent loop of development. Start with an idea, move through, take the technologies for what they're worth. And one of the other things that I would put out there to our local governments is that a lot of times the technology is moving faster than the education systems are. So companies like Roush, we have to work with the development companies that are bringing these technologies to market to bring that information to the industry so that we can integrate and understand what the technology is and how to use it.
Awesome. So we're running a little short on time, but I want to take a second and just have each of you reflect on, a pretty quick but last final question, and we won't go in a particular order. Anybody who wants to volunteer can jump in. But my question is, we see a lot of statistics and things like that are focused on how quickly we need to transform the transportation sector in order to meet the needs of our nation. So the transformation required is going to be so fast and so dramatic. What's one thing that it can be daunting? What's one thing that really makes you optimistic that we can achieve these radical transformations in the way we power our transportation sector, in the way we power our economy, that will allow us to achieve that, whether it's technology or finance or just political action, consumer action? What's one thing that makes you really optimistic that we'll be able to achieve the challenges in front of us? Marcy looks thoughtful. Marcy looks like she's about to jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll dive in. The breadth of automaker commitment, I think, is pretty important to keep an eye on, and it's just the number of automakers promising the number of types of makes and models to really give people the choice that they need, combined with the developing tech for longer ranges and faster charging speeds, and that I think is really, really promising. And then just from my little perch, when I first started this, our value proposition, our business model is to offer, that we would install these fast chargers, which are like hundreds of thousands of dollar projects overall, and we offer them up to site hosts for free, and in some cases pay rent. And so this proposition is like, bring this free amenity. And in the early days when I first started this, it was a conversation. It wasn't like, yes, thank you, I will take this free amenity and put this in my lot. And it didn't really even matter if they had a huge lot. It was so new and so just not on their radar that it was like a month-long sales conversation to get them to take this free amenity that was going to differentiate them amongst their competitors and like bring new customers and all that stuff. And that's different now. Everything has shifted. It's the value proposition is much more naturally grasped and understood and proactively understood, where we've got inbound like we've never had before, and the rest of the ecosystem is falling in line as well. Like for us, it's all about utilities and permitting authorities and like the whole charging ecosystem sort of falling in line for the charging piece of that. And it's all starting to move. So it is all very promising.
Excellent. Bottom-up action, changes in perception. That feels very encouraging. Any,
Ecosystem,
yeah, go ahead, Al.
ecosystem, charging ecosystem is one of the key factors. And another factor is states adopting, instead of just the standard federal rebate, states need to look at more legislation to adopt additional rebates to get the price for these EVs to come down. I was watching a commercial last night on an Audi, the new Audi QS. It says starting at $102,000. So we definitely have to do something to offset the charges for these EVs. I know it does cost a lot to actually get these things in production, but we have to get the adopting people to embrace it. It needs to be affordable, and more manufacturers need to be on board.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think, you know, one reason for optimism is that we're seeing those resources being flowed from action from the federal government that I think will make that more achievable.
Mm-hmm.
Michael,
One more
Paul?
quick point, Michael.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah.
The startup companies that are out there that are entering the electrification market, I think they are they're positioning themselves to drive the big manufacturers because they're more nimble. They can do things more quickly. They can lobby for the funding that they need based on their ideas. And there are a lot of more fresh ideas out of the startups than the larger auto manufacturers have. And that's attractive for everyone that wants to get into an EV. They want something new and different. And I'll just put it this way, the big three are being driven by the startups now because the startups are moving so quickly and bringing so many new ideas to market that the big three are chasing them now.
And Paul, you make a really good point on that. With the Rivian, everybody's jumping on that Rivian platform, and you make that really good point on that they came up with that platform, and all the big threes, everybody's running the jump on that platform because they're trying to make something better out of something that's already good. So that innovation is out there.
That's right. All right, Michael,
Yeah,
wrap us up, but pithy and quick. Yeah.
Very quick. The competition in startups is real at the OEM level. We're seeing it in school bus, fierce competition, but also startups like Highland that are development shops. We landed the biggest school bus deal, EV school bus deal in the world, and there's suddenly a bunch of competitors trying to electrify school buses. So we think every new EV is good and competition is good. So hopeful there.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all my panelists for an outstanding conversation. I'm really excited about our next conversation as well, led by Dan Sawmiller, a dear friend, and focused on veterans in the workforce. So I'm going to turn it back to Aaron and look forward to that. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, Michael and panelists, that was really fantastic. And as I said before, we always feel like we need more time because we always need more time. People come up with such great ideas and great conversation. So, but we are going to transition because I need to be respectful of my panelists' time. They might need to go put kids to bed. So if you see a child run through here, that's why. But Dan Sawmiller is the Ohio Energy Policy Director and Federal Director of Labor Relations for the Natural Resources Defense Council. Dan is based in Columbus, Ohio, has worked on clean energy issues in Ohio for more than 15 years. He spent a lot of his time today focused on the electric vehicle battery supply chain, including the ways this shifting global economy impacts our national security. Dan's a combat veteran of the Ohio Army National Guard, where he served as a combat engineer and spent time on an IED sweep team in Baghdad and on security missions at the Abu Ghraib prison facility. Dan, thank you so much for convening this panel.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for having me. It's been an interesting evening so far. Tons of stuff to follow up on here. And the last panel in particular, I thought was interesting. What I heard was jobs, jobs, jobs in all of that. So let me kick us off by just sharing a couple of quick slides to kind of set the stage for this conversation. It's, let me know when that pops up and you can see it.
Yep, we can see it. It's not in presenter mode now, but we can see.
I'm working on it. There we go.
Perfect.
So a little bit repetitive, but at least in my mind, it's always helpful to have a few pictures to cement things into your brain. So let me just walk through a couple of quick slides, and then I'll introduce our panelists and kick off a conversation around jobs. So the first slide here that I want to show. So these were prepared by a consulting firm called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. They're a global consultant on all things lithium ion, battery supply chain, automotive supply chain. one of the best. And I'm working with them to evaluate Ohio's position. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, evaluating Ohio's position in this whole transforming market. But what I want to show just quickly on this slide here is that, public opinion, policy around the world, climate action, shareholder demand, consumer preference, it's all leading to massive commitments from automakers around the world. We've heard it at length tonight already, but this just gives you a sense of what around the world, the kind of commitments that are being made. It's just a massive shift. What I want to show here is that this has been touched on a little bit, but as a military veteran, this is something that really motivates me in this space to want to be active and do my advocacy. But I'm proud to say that the current administration is taking some aggressive action here. I think Mike Wu mentioned some of the leadership we're seeing out of Secretary Austin's office at the Department of Defense. But this chart depicts the 4 major stages of the battery manufacturing supply chain, starting with mining in the top left corner, chemical processing and refining over at the top right corner, cathode and anodes, and then cell manufacturing. And what you can see here is that a lot of this is dominated by China. The European Union is quickly moving policy forward to catch up, and now the United States is moving. So we've got a lot of investment that needs to be made for the United States to really capture its share. And these are investments that are being made today. And once they're made, they're going to establish the footprint of auto manufacturing for decades. And so here you can see in the different sectors of the supply chain for the battery supply chain, just the level of investment. And this slide is a little bit dated. It says here 88 current producers in cell manufacturing with $130 billion planned. There's something like 200 of these mega factories, 209, I think, around the world today. And so this was a slide prepared a little over a year ago, probably. I didn't get a chance to update it, but that's just how fast it's growing. These investments are massive, and it's in every sector of the supply chain, top to bottom. But one thing I wanted to just add is it's not just the EV sector. And so I know there's been some comments in the chat and some discussion earlier, but these in the manufacturing space for the battery supply chain, the auto supply chain, they're looking to buy renewable energy just like all these other companies you see. I'm sure if you look at this slide, it takes you just a few seconds to maybe count at least 10 that you're very familiar with, maybe products that you use regularly. But this is the transition that we're seeing, and it's broader than just EVs. It's the clean energy economy. And just wanted to make the point that the automotive OEMs are not an outlier by any stretch. They are wanting to sell us electric vehicles that have no carbon footprint. And so that's all the way down to, all the way through the whole supply chain. And so we're seeing just leaps and bounds in this space. And I wanted to highlight that because we're here to talk about jobs. And there's a report that comes out every year by environmental entrepreneurs called EVGO. Their website's there at the bottom of the slide, where they sort of track job growth. And so these are just a couple of snippets that I pulled from their latest report just to show you how many jobs we're seeing and how wide ranging it is, from manufacturing to professional services to construction, repair, maintenance, all sorts of stuff. So this clean energy economy is broad. And in the bottom left slide there, I just wanted to highlight, it's not in the national report, but they do state and regional reports that show you how many veterans are being hired. And what we're seeing is that in the US economy, veterans make up like 5 to 6% of employment. But if you pull it and look at the clean energy economy, that number is close to 11%. So the industry is growing, and they want our veterans. So I wanted to just kick it off with that. Let me stop sharing my screen, and we'll introduce our panel. So we've got Eric Eversole with us. I think hopefully everybody's unmuted their screen. John Gardner, Burt McDermott, and Scott Misico. Eric is a retired U.S. Navy Reserve Judge Advocate, General, get this right, Navy Reserve Judge Advocate General's Corps Captain. Did I get it, Eric? Is that right? That's right. Mouthful of a title. He now leads the day-to-day operations of Hiring Our Heroes, which is a nationwide effort to develop and promote military talent in the United States. His team helps to create and connect transitioning service members veterans and their families with meaningful training programs and careers. He served active duty and in the reserve of the military for more than 24 years, retiring in 2019 as a Navy captain, holds a Juris Doctorate degree from the Indiana University School of Law in Indianapolis, and a Bachelor of Arts from Wabash College, where he also now serves on the Board of Trustees. He lives in Northern Virginia with his wife Amanda and their daughters Ellie and Lizzie. Thanks, Eric, for joining us. We also have John Gardner. John currently works as the manager for Veterans Initiatives and Diversity Hiring at Roush, who we just learned about in our previous panel. John also served more than 24 years of active duty service in the Air Force and retired in 2012. In his current role at Roush, he works closely with veteran organizations and military installations to find career opportunities. He also works with the executive leadership team, which I find to be interesting. Hopefully we'll get him to talk about. But he works with the executive team at Roush to identify veteran-related philanthropic opportunities for the company and acts as a resource for any veteran-related matters that come up. He earned his undergrad in organizational leadership from Ashford University and is currently pursuing a master's in human resources from the University of Arizona. Next, we've got Bert McDermott. Bert is a regional coordinator for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and he's the coordinator for IBW's 4th District's Veterans Committee. Bert served in the West Virginia Army National Guard, beginning as a cavalry scout in 1983, finished as the Chief Warrant Officer, 2nd class, as a Huey pilot with 6 years of service in 1989. In 92, he was selected to the Joint Electrical Apprenticeship and Training Program in Charleston. And after graduating, he went on to serve 12 years as a trustee on that program and as the Secretary Treasurer, assisting veterans wanting to use their GI benefits. Most recently, he was appointed as the 4th District's Veteran Committee Coordinator, where he assists local unions across DC, Kentucky, Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia to establish and coordinate their own veteran committee activities. And then finally, our distinguished panel wraps up with Scott Missico. He's the shop supervisor for Cobb County at Cobb County, Georgia's Fleet Services. We just heard a little bit about that. Scott manages 15 employees and over 1,700 assets. He's on the front line of alternative fuel vehicle education and implementation, currently managing 47 electric vehicles, 69 hybrid vehicles, 36 propane and bi-fuel vehicles, 4 electric motorcycles, and 1 absorbed natural gas vehicle, which I'm going to ask him about in a little bit because I don't know what an absorbed natural gas vehicle is, but I'm about to find out. Scott's work in the new technology for police interceptor vehicles has made the 900 officers and deputies in Cobb County much safer, which he'll talk about in a little bit. Scott went to Ferris State University for automotive technology, spent 4 years in Michigan and Texas National Guards and 4 years regular Army. He's been working in the industry for 30 years and has been with Cobb County Fleet for 2.5 years. So we're 50% Army here, so we're going to say go Army, beat Navy. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel and thank you for joining us. Happy Veterans Day to all of you. Happy birthday to any of the Marines that we have in our audience with us. But I quickly walked through the high-level opportunity that we're seeing to try to give a sense of the scale of where this is going and how it relates to the broader sector. But sometimes when we talk at this high level, you can lose sight of the impact on real people. And so each of you in your current positions are doing things that are helping individuals, and in our case today, military veterans, and as well as first responders, as we heard about in Cobb County. So wanted to see if we could shift our dialogue here and ask each of you to talk for a few minutes about your employer and the different programs that you're managing to support our military veterans and help them find careers in this space. Eric, maybe we can start with you. If you could tell us about the Hiring Our Heroes program and the different ways you're helping veterans get connected to careers.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks for allowing me to participate tonight. Let me quickly say hi to my old friend, John Gardner. We were battle buddies when this space initially kicked off, doing a lot of work in Detroit, like a long time ago, but it's good to see your face, John.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Hiring Our Heroes is a grassroots, national grassroots organization that's committed to helping veterans find meaningful employment. And I will tell you, when we started 10 years ago, we were doing triage, quite candidly. We had a lot of unemployed veterans, especially those under the age of 25. We were coming back from combat deployments, and the job market was awful. And it was, in some instances, for those under 25, it was nearly 30% back in 2011 and 2012. So, as part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we worked very aggressively to leverage what we had, which was that national local footprint. We did a bunch of hiring events for the first couple of years of our existence. We did 800 in the first 3 years. But as veteran unemployment started to come down, and as companies really started to see and understand the value proposition of veteran talent in their workforce, our mission became much more strategic as well. And so, fast forward now 10 years in this space, we're really focused on how do we help service members, especially transitioning service members, earlier in the pipeline, find and understand pathways into meaningful careers, especially in emerging areas of opportunity, tech, EV, logistics. There's so many great opportunities, but what we find, and I'll just say this and then be mindful of everyone's time, is that the biggest thing that we've learned over a decade now is that these service members want to pursue these opportunities, but many of them come from blue collar backgrounds, and they don't know the first thing about EVs. They don't know the first thing about technology. It's not because they don't want to learn, but they didn't come from that type of background. I'm a product of that. I grew up in Indiana. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. So they said, look, Eric, you're going to either go to college or you're going to join the military. I did both, but it didn't make it any easier on that pathway. And so as we talk about creating economic opportunity and pathways into EV opportunities for service members, let's not forget, it's not a desire that they don't want to pursue these great opportunities, but we have to take a step back and understand that their understanding of how to navigate the space may be limited.
Thanks, Eric. That's really interesting. I love how you talk about the evolution of the program over time. I've got a lot of experience working in the clean energy transition, and I've seen how communities that relied on fossil fuel infrastructure sometimes struggle to find where do they turn next. And I've always just kind of felt like in the military, it's kind of inherent in our career. You join up for active duty service, there's some point that you're going to leave that and be looking for a civilian career. So to have programs that are there and available and always adjusting to how the economy is changing is so important.
Yeah. Well, Dan, just remember, they're told what to do from day one. You show up and you put your feet on these yellow boots or these footprints. And, it's a scary process when you take away that directional guidance. And so we just have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, it's so important. It's a good thing that the program is out there. Let's turn to John, if we can. Can we go to you next? See if you can talk to us about the different veteran initiatives that you have at Roush. And, and I was reading through your bio, it talked about how you work with your executive team. If you're comfortable and can, anything you could say about how your executive team sort of views the work you do around helping military veterans find work in this space, and just any guidance you get from them in your work, but anything else you'd like to share?
Sure. It's good to be on the panel, Dan. I appreciate you guys for having me on. This has been a labor of love for me personally. As an active duty member that retired, actually being scared about whether I was going to be able to still be successful as I was in the military. Once I got the opportunity to come in the veteran hiring world, it's something that I've taken very seriously over the, as Eric said, almost 10 years. And the cool thing about Roush is our program, it allows me to go out to those transition fairs, and oftentimes it's all about relationships that you're building. You go to the transition fairs, you're talking to folks who are getting ready to transition, and every time I talk to someone, whether it's a military member or the spouse that are often at these events, I always go back to how I felt in 2012 when I was about to transition. And so that scary feeling of not knowing what was next is the approach that I take when I deal with them. So if you want to call it holding their hand or whatever it is, what I do is I make sure that I give a lot of one-on-one mentorship, a lot of one-on-one help, whether it's resume review, interview tips. Actually, there have been times that I've brought people out to a Roush facility, one that I could take them to kind of show them who we are, right? And it's those things that kind of let that veteran know that you're on their team, right? And so working with folks like my good friend and colleague, Paul Bowser, who's a veteran also, I can also share what I think about a potential candidate that I'm talking to, share it with Paul, and then Paul, with his experience of being at Roush over 20 plus years, he can give me the Roush answer, right? And so when you're talking about veterans that are transitioning, the main thing that you want to do is to make sure that they know that you're on their side and you're going to help make that transition very easy for them. And this is another cool thing about Roush. Before I talk about the executive team and what I do with them, you know, obviously I want to hire every single veteran that I talk to and bring them to Roush, right? So if we cannot find a fit, I'm able to use my network of other veteran-friendly companies to help that veteran find a job. And when you spoke about the 11% number with EV work, I mean, that's an awesome thing, because typically companies are trying to have 6 to 7, 8% of their workforce be veteran hires. 11% is awesome. And when you look at EV, like Eric said, veterans don't usually have typically that background, but you have to look at the soft skills. Do they have a good attitude? Do they have a strong work ethic? Are they going to be a good team member? Those are the things that we look at Roush, where we help bring someone on and give them the opportunity that they may not have gotten, right? And we feel like if they have those things, we can bring them in and make them a successful team member with our company. As far as dealing with the executive team, I'll give you an example of a gentleman who's been at Roush probably since its inception. He's been at Roush close to 40 years. He's a president of Paul's organization, but he wholeheartedly supports the veteran hiring program. He gives me anything and everything that I need. And he picks my brain about how veterans think. What are veterans looking for? How can we become a more stronger company to help veterans? And then I give my input based on folks that are coming to us and asking us about philanthropic opportunities and things like that. So it's a win-win situation when you have a guy who's very passionate about taking care of people who's just like him, and then you have a company who's very passionate about bringing those folks in and giving them an opportunity. So I wouldn't trade my job for anything in the world. I love what I do. And again, it's because, like Eric said, we've been in this game for close to 10 years, but it's a labor of love that you never can give up on, because you're helping people who are like you.
Well, that's great. And I appreciate you sharing. It's good to see that there's that kind of support from the leadership level. And I find that that's pretty consistent for these programs around the country. There's a number of different programs like this that are available, and there is a lot of support. We're running short on time. It was handed to us a little behind. So let's move to the next panelist here. We've got just a few more minutes to go, but I was going to turn to you, Bert, if we could go next with the IBEW. I want to tell you, thanks for joining. I really appreciate, we've had a lot of support from the IBEW and a lot of clean energy stuff we're doing in Ohio. Really great partnership to have. Really glad that you could join us for the panel. I was going to just hand it to you. See if you want to talk about your veteran coordinating committee and your hiring preference programs that you guys roll out at the IBEW.
Absolutely, Dan. Appreciate the opportunity and definitely enjoyed listening to all the panelists and the Admiral in particular. Quickly, I'll, for the sake of full disclosure, I may be Army, but I do have a son-in-law that's currently serving and is a submariner. Him and my oldest daughter are out in Bremerton, Washington. So I'm torn on that front. But glad to talk to you about the Veterans Electrical Entry Program that we have. The IBEW, working together with the National Electrical Contractors Association, we've seen the green energy work, in particular electrical vehicles, and things like that for some time on the horizon. And we've been planning and training and preparing for that. We participated in the helmets to hard hats within the building construction trade since 2003. But personally, myself had experienced, even though we were heavily recruiting service members into our registered apprenticeship programs across the country, it was somewhat restrictive because we were looking for people with experience. And the thing that's exciting about the Veterans Electrical Entry Program is that it actually includes a pre-apprenticeship program that addresses some of the issues that Eric and John have both spoke to, in that in their transition period, they are given the opportunity to participate online and basically complete that with prior approval with their command. They can participate in that pre-apprenticeship program at their own pace from 7 weeks to 6 months, whichever is comfortable to them. But part of that is with coordinating with our Electrical Training Alliance program, they can identify 3 training programs across the nation that they're interested in, and they'll work on direct entry into those apprenticeship programs and coordinating that with them in that process. It is relatively new. It's been up and running for a little over 2 years. Initially, it started out located around some of the existing military facilities, and they were trying to do the in-person training, but they quickly recognized the interest and the potential and transitioned that thing to actually being an online program, so more of the service members can participate. I remember on my 12 years on the committee prior to transition into my new role, there were many times with helmets to hard hats that we were online talking to service members that were overseas, and as John mentioned, trying to help and walk them through that process is very motivating and exciting, and a privilege to be a part of that transition. But I'll turn it back over to you now. I can go into more detail and talk for hours on this, but for the interest of everybody's time, I'll leave it with that and can provide information for anybody that needs it. Did we lose Dan? I don't see him on the screen anymore.
Oh no. Well, hey, I'll just step in, I guess. So I think Scott is up next. If you want to talk a little bit about some of the work you guys are doing with training programs to make sure that veterans have the tools they need to join this ever expanding EV workforce. Scott, are you good to go?
I am.
Awesome. Let's hear from it. Yep. So I know you're an advocate of some of the community college programs. Tell us a little bit about how you've interacted with those programs and what it's meant for your shop.
Okay, so we are on the board of a couple of different colleges, and I have worked with a couple of others as community or the industry oversees community college programs. In state of Georgia, there is a new law that all community college programs for this industry are free for 2 years. So we work closely with them. But in my experience in the industry for 30 years, veterans are a perfect fit for government fleets and fleets of all sizes. They are very open to change in a stressful environment. They're open to technologies to help them to accomplish their mission. They are very prepared and on time for work every day. They have a great work ethic and respond well to chain of command directives and shifts. And this is important in today's world of changing technology. In EV, alternative fuels, and many other things that we're dealing with in fleets. And so I'm excited to hire veterans. For Cobb County, we in many municipalities, of course, we have a point system for hiring individuals, and veterans have a 5-point advantage, and disabled veterans have a 10-point advantage right away. So we look for veterans to serve in the county and other forms. And so we're excited to have 8 veterans in our organization there, and they do very well.
That's great. So it looks like we did lose Dan. So I don't.
So yeah,
The
I
wonders.
was a little bit unprepared.
The
but then
wonders
also-
of virtual panels. So yeah, I think we've blown past our stop time. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge that we've got a lot of great expertise here, and I'd love to, just get a few other thoughts. Like as we stare at this EV, workplace, and ideally for the minerals, to markets, development of those supply chains. Obviously, supply chains is something that maybe people didn't think about a lot, 6 months ago, but we're now being confronted with it, kind of in the news on a daily level. What do you think, as folks who are looking to kind of hire veterans and get them in that space, where do you see the opportunities, like expanding beyond maybe the programs you've done, or the projects you're currently familiar with, but as we look at, again, the development of the battery supply chain that we mentioned earlier, I think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs if we have the policies in place to make sure those supply chains are developed here in the U.S. I'd be really interested in, like hearing maybe Eric, your thoughts about how to expand these programs to get into these expanding industries.
I'm going to tell you, it's hard work. I mean, we are now working, generationally from a workforce perspective that's much different than what it was 2 decades ago. And that's certainly true for our service members. Technology is outpacing the development of the workforce. And what we're seeing now is significant investments by companies across the country who desperately need and want the best of the talent. And they understand that the traditional pathways for that talent to get into the workforce don't exist like they did 10 years ago. The emergence, and very important emergence, of community colleges, training, certifications, and skill sets are all going to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to creating pathways into these opportunities. But I'm going to say the one thing that's going to be the thing people haven't fully figured out yet, but we need to, is how do we get past a piece of paper, a resume, or a LinkedIn profile to evaluate talent? We have to start looking, as John was talking about, these soft skills, the problem solving abilities, the leadership. And, if COVID taught us anything, we need resilient people who can work under a lot of stress at a fast pace and adapt to an ever-changing technology. And so we're going to have to learn how we do that. One of the biggest programs we've grown in the last couple of years is our internship fellowship program for active duty service members. I'll tell you right now, this year it's for people with degrees. So it's about half senior enlisted, half junior officers, but we're expanding into populations of junior enlisted, which I think are really critical. But for our program this year, we put 1,600 active duty service members into 12-week internships. 85% of them were hired. And the average salary was $95,000. And the concept of internships for any kid who goes to college isn't that foreign. And it's not that foreign now for active duty service members during that last time period to continue to receive DoD pay while they go out and put their foot in the door. And look, it works. Companies don't have to figure out acronyms and resumes and all that stuff. So, you know, we're working with the Solar Foundation on grants into the solar industry, work with companies like Toyota on kind of, you know, a lot of what they do from a manufacturing perspective, and a lot of companies across the country. If anyone's interested, here's the other thing. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free. Music to everyone's ears, right? So reach out to us, and we'll help bring some of that talent into your organizations, because it's good, really good.
That's great. John, any thoughts on your end about this expanding workplace and how to make sure that vets are well situated to capture the opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, Eric stole my thunder. I was going to mention internships. But just to piggyback off of what he said, I think the internship program is a great way for the veteran, obviously, but then also for the company to evaluate and give that veteran some experience at a civilian company, right? So it definitely helps make the transition a little bit smoother. But yeah, that was going to be my thing, is the internship, trying to figure out ways to, and then also changing the mindset of veterans. When you say the word internship, sometimes a veteran is thinking like, wait, I need a full-time job. But oftentimes companies are looking to try to use those internships to bring them into a full-time job. So that's going to be very important going forward also.
That's great. Thanks, John. Any final thoughts from Bert or Scott? Last chance of the mic before we just have to wrap up because we've gone so long.
Just quickly, Aaron, you know, a different term, similar process from what I'm hearing. We call it an apprenticeship. It's a great opportunity. A big hurdle that we're working on and are transitioning through is getting the word out about the program itself. The Helmets to Hard Hats itself is fairly familiar now. And that's what's great about having this opportunity to promote the actual Veterans Electrical Entry program itself, and to talk a little bit about it. It's an earn while you learn program and process that has a progression set up that they can see, and you know, see that light at the end of the tunnel, and see the rewards of progressing through that process.
Great, Scott.
And yeah, I wanted to say that in the automotive industry, it's a continued learning process throughout your entire career. And to have a place to work that is invested in that education and mentoring individuals throughout their career to increase their knowledge and to move them along in the industry is a big benefit for anybody. And veterans are perfectly suited for this type of industry, and look forward to working with every veteran possible in the future.
That's great. Well, we are well past time. And so I apologize to our panelists who are maybe more generous with their time than they thought they were going to be going into this. But I think, you know, it's hard to wrap up a conversation like this that, you know, I think has touched on some incredibly important points. So as we look at this kind of, you know, this new transportation future, we know that we are, you know, there's a lot of reasons to move to domestically produced electrons, and to, you know, that the future of transportation is very clearly EV, looking at the commitments these corporations are making and countries are making. But what I definitely know is that, you know, veterans' voices, I think, are important in the conversation. And as we heard from Representative Zoka and Admiral Blair, you know, the value of elevating your perspective and making sure that it's that we're coming to this conversation with some very clear kind of nonpartisan credentials is incredibly useful. And I think that as we look at the, you know, hundreds of thousands of jobs that should be landing on our shores with the proper policies to bring them here, that veterans are central to the hiring process to staff those positions. So I want to thank everyone for taking their time tonight. What I want to encourage everyone to do is to use those voices So late Friday night, early Saturday morning, I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but the House passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which includes funding to support EV charging infrastructure and electric buses. As we heard about earlier, it's $5 billion for EVSE along highways. It's $2.5 billion for grants for communities that are disadvantaged and rural. It's $2.5 billion for electric school buses, and another $2.5 billion for alternative fuel school buses, which sounds like a lot. But if you add those numbers up, we're still trailing the investment that China and the EU have made into their EV space. So there's more work to be done to ensure that we move forward. So we applaud Congress for sending that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to the president's desk, promptly signing it. But we really do need to see that's like kind of the first step in a two-step process to get where we need to be to capture this EV moment. So again, from Glasgow to DC to Detroit, the kind of commitments to an EV future are clear, but we need to keep, kind of keep the conversation going to ensure we move in the right direction. I would encourage veterans to engage in that conversation, and we'll have some tools left to do it. I think we will share those. I think if anyone who registered with the event will have some follow-up information we'll send your way, so that you have some of these the jobs and hiring programs that were mentioned tonight. Make sure you have the links to find those and share those, and as well as some policy advocacy opportunities as well. So look at your inbox. But again, thank you all so much, all our wonderful veterans, all our wonderful EV advocates, and our and in terms of moving forward with this type of event in the future, we'll let you know. Clearly, we're going to need to keep an eye on diversity in our panelists, not just race or gender, but branch, I think, is incredibly important as well. So thank you all for your time, your energy, your attention, and have a great night, folks.
Thank you. Go Air Force.
There it was.